Rolling? Oh, okay. Yeah. I want to make two videos right now, and they both have to do with phenomenology. I'm reading a book. Find it. I'm reading this book. It's pretty old, actually. It's a book by Herbert Spiegelberg. That's a very awesome, in my opinion, phenomenologist who writes a lot about Husserl, as well as phenomenology itself, the method and such. This book is called Doing Phenomenology. It has lots of different sections and stuff, but this book was very hard to come by, and when I was able to get it, it was not cheap. Let's just say that. And this is a kind of a worn down book, pretty much. So this is kind of making me think a lot about phenomenology. So I'm gonna have a good amount. This plus these two videos, this video, the next video, and then 3 more following that about just phenomenology itself. And also following that, I'm gonna try and do a couple things on this book by Werner Marx. Also, not a cheap book. This book too, I'm gonna do some videos on, because I read the essay Difference, and I want to get deep into this of grammatology. And then this book right here, I just started reading it after probably not having touched it in a few years. So I don't really remember a whole lot, so I'm gonna have to reacquaint myself with the concepts. But that's a few things I'm gonna be doing, as well as continuing with this classic. So that's kind of what I'm doing. This video and the next video are going to be pretty much about phenomenology. And when I think about phenomenology, I think about it from the Heideggerian aspect of Dasein and being in the world. I think of being in the world as one unity or one entity of being, where we can get at being. We can get at being through being in the world and all of its aspects that are talked about in being in time. And I also think about it through the various methods and various concepts that come from Edmund Husserl. I have various videos on phenomenology. I have like a 55 video playlist of phenomenology. So I want to talk about phenomenology and idealism. This video on phenomenology and objectivism or realism in the next. Sorry about the noise, by the way. That's some construction over there. Anyway, first of all, when I think about being in the world, I think about phenomenology for one thing. Being in the world and Dasein are aspects of the phenomenological perspective, or the phenomenological perspective of getting at being in the world for one thing, as well as looking at the structures and all that stuff of the world and such. And for one thing, I want to kind of separate in these two videos. I want to separate phenomenology indefinitely from idealism and realism. In this one, I want to talk about idealism with respect to phenomenology. Idealism is the statement. It's the philosophical movement that was in George Berkeley, Immanuel Kant, Arthur Schopenhauer, Johann Gottlieb Fichte, Hegel. Those from from the 18th century and modern philosophy, and through 19th century philosophy. Now, idealism is to say that it's kind of related somewhat to solipsism, but idealism essentially is saying that when I look at this book, it's a mental representation, but there's nothing real or objective behind it. There's no, there's no, there's no, there's no thing in it. There's no real objective thing behind it. But everything that I see in my world is dependent on my experience, on my mind. It's dependent on this, on what I see. It's dependent on that, and there's nothing in the world that I see or anyone else sees. So there's also subjective idealism and intersubjective idealism, which is that either nothing I see or nothing I see is independent of my experience, or nothing any of us see is independent of our collective experience. Now, this is closely related to idealism. If idealism and realism are both closely related to phenomenology, but the real dictum of phenomenology by Husserl is to the things themselves, which says, when I look at this book, or when I look at this remote, or something like that, it's saying that I'm going to suspend judgment as to whether this is a mental representation, or if there's something mind independent that is there beyond this, or is there something mind independent beyond what I'm seeing of this remote. Phenomenology, the method, suspends belief in either of those things. It's going to say that my phenomena, what I see, that's what there is. And the things themselves, what I see, the phenomena, are what I'm going to study. And there's various methods of doing so, just descriptive, eidetic, constitutional, and he talks a lot about all those methods in this book too. It's called doing phenomenology. But why is, given, since phenomenology with that very dictum separates itself from both subjectivism and objectivism, how can they be closely related? How can they be closely related? For one thing, idealism can be closely related to phenomenology because of the fact that, for one, of course, because Husserl gave it the name transcendental phenomenology, or transcendental idealism, phenomenological transcendental idealism. If you want to know about that, I have a video that just talks about phenomenological transcendental idealism of Husserl itself. And that was not necessarily posing idealism in itself, like, thus kind of making obsolete the very dictum, making obsolete the very method and reason for phenomenology. But Husserl actually became idealist later. He kind of later in his, around the time when he wrote this, I guess, following that, or around or following that, or something like that. He did actually move towards idealism and said, you know what, it is really idealism. But the reason that I think that idealism is closely related to phenomenology is because we're studying phenomena. In idealism and phenomenology, we are both studying phenomena. But it's just sorry about that noise. I don't know if you can hear it, but I can. It's really distracting. But anyway, essentially, I guess what I'm trying to say is that because of the fact that both study phenomena and they both are worried about what we see, and that's it. They both are really closely related. But I want to separate the two. I want to think about those two being separate from each other indefinitely. Um, and I think they should be separated. Somebody needs to, write something. I mean, I'm sure that someone has, but thinking about those two things as separate as possible. Husserl kind of made them a little bit closer, and I don't think that's the way it should be done. Really, I think that they should be as far apart as possible and separated. Because the the closer and closer you bring the two together, or realism and phenomenology together, the closer you get to doing what Husserl did later in his philosophical career. He pretty much took the idealist position. But the closer you bring to phenomenology, idealism, or realism, the closer you get to making phenomenology obsolete, and making the method and all the reason that it was, all the reason that it was written by Husserl makes all of that obsolete, really. So, what separates it is actually, in fact, saying that what's real is this. What is real for any of us is what we perceive in phenomena. Phenomena are real for us, and that's all that's real. We are not going to we're not going to say that they're mind dependent or anything like that, because this is what's real. Because saying that something is mind dependent kind of makes it less real. So if we say that they're real, if we say that the phenomena, the things themselves in the Husserlian sense, are real, we thus are good in separating idealism from phenomenology. The other problem, though, is separating phenomenology from realism or objectivism.